Hey, are you looking for a single player game that will take you a decent amount of time to complete? Well, we've got you covered with this list of 2021 single player games with decent length, in no particular order. And it's also worth pointing out that some of these games aren't just like the regular games you've heard about all year. We wanted to also use this list as an opportunity to talk about some games we haven't mentioned enough. So keep in mind to set expectations. A lot of these games aren't like Skyrim level endless open worlds, but here we went personal experience, online opinions, and howlongtobeat.com for references, and these should satisfy you. Anyway, let's get started off with number 10. Sherlock Holmes Chapter 1 is a game you may not have heard of or really had on your radar, but it should take you around 25 hours. Now, we're going to mention it many times in this video. A lot of that time depends on what type of player you are, if you're mainlining everything, or if you're really exploring and not skipping cutscenes and checking out side quests. And interestingly enough, Sherlock Holmes Chapter 1 takes what the previous Sherlock Holmes games did and really kind of turns it on its head and adds an open world, which doesn't seem like it makes sense for a Sherlock Holmes game, but here you do have the opportunity to really explore, find clues, get engaged with this world, and find some pretty engaging side quests. It's one of those games where it has side quests that you're actually going to want to check out. This is a younger Sherlock Holmes. They're going for like a different vibe here. It's him in his earlier days exploring a Mediterranean island and city of Cordona, and he's a bit more of a badass. The combat's a little weird, but still these Sherlock Holmes games are massively underrated and pretty cool, and if you're looking for an interesting new one to jump in with, it's this one, Chapter 1. Now, next over at number 9, let's talk Far Cry 6. This one is a little bit more of one of the obvious ones on the list because it's a Far Cry game. It's a massive open world riddled with side quests, things to collect, things to do, and your time can vary, but ultimately, when you're in a Far Cry game, you're going to spend a lot of time. The average time to beat for this game is around 35 hours, but you can easily squeeze a lot more out of that just because Yara is a pretty interesting tropical location with a big city, tons of different little areas. Granted, it's all a tropical setting, but they managed to vary it up here and there, and it's worth checking out. Personally, we said it in our Before You Buy video, I found Far Cry 6 to be a lot more fun than Far Cry 5 or Far Cry New Dawn, which a lot of people forgot about. This one is possibly worth checking out, especially if you've been burnt out on the Far Cry formula for a while. This one might be fun enough to get you back into it. Now for number 8, we have Pathfinder, Wrath of the Righteous, a game on consoles, but I think is best played on PC. The average time to beat this thing is around 120 hours if you're doing the main quests and most of the side quests, which you'll probably do, and you'll probably grind through a lot of it because the game can get pretty challenging, and that's where some of the length lies, but where the true length really comes from is the fact that it's just one of those big-ass isometric RPGs. Think a Divinity Original Sin type thing. If you've played that, you know what you're getting into here. You're getting massive worlds, tons of interesting dialogue, fun side quests to pursue, different ways to build your character, stuff to find. There's just a lot of cool stuff in this game, the gameplay aside, just design-wise and looks-wise and arts-wise. If you like big old fantasy RPGs and you like them a little bit more independent, Pathfinder Wrath of the Righteous is definitely worth checking out, especially for the fact that it'll keep you busy for quite a while. Probably the most out of any of the games on this list. Now, next over at number 7, we have Shin Megami Tensei 5, a game which, admittedly, we haven't highlighted enough on Gameranx throughout 2021, but the average time to beat this one is around 63 hours. Shin Megami Tensei 5 really embraces being on new hardware and just kind of makes everything feel bigger and better, and a lot of that length just comes from that good old-fashioned JRPG gameplay, which to some people is just truly comfort food, and the, obviously very different Tokyo they have here is a really good setting for exploration. These games have a very unique spin on them, especially if you've played the Persona games, but you've never played the Shin Megami Tensei games. You're probably going to find a lot to like here. This is a good jumping in point, and the way you explore and you bounce between these different biomes and you slowly build out these specialized teams and collect things, of course, you're going to find yourself sinking a lot of time into this one on your Nintendo Switch. It was a good year for JRPGs, and Shin Megami Tensei is definitely one of the ones worth highlighting. But over at number 6, we also have Tales of Arise, another JRPG worth highlighting, where the average time to beat is around 58 hours. And that's just because this is a dense game. In a lot of ways, it feels like a very traditional JRPG with small little areas with loading screens in between and towns and hubs, but it's just so interesting. This game gives you tons and tons of lore and stuff to read and people to talk to really learn about this unique world they built out. Now, Tales of Arise is its own contained story, so if you haven't played any of the previous Tales games, that's fine. This is a good place to jump in. And what you're going to get is some pretty traditional JRPG kind of active style combat, but with really good team comboing stuff, all with a really interesting and over-the-top style and cool characters that you're building up along the way. If it sounds very straightforward, from presentation to gameplay and what you're seeing on screen, yes, it is, but it is still so incredibly compelling, and it's one of our favorite games of the year. Now, next over at number 5, let's talk about the Monster Hunter series, because it had 2 big releases this year, and they'll take up a lot of your time. The first is Monster Hunter Stories 2, Wings of Ruin. The average time to beat this is around 53 hours, and if you've played the previous Monster Hunter Stories game, you understand what you're getting into. They are dense, and just really, Monster Hunter games are in general, because also this year we had Monster Hunter Rise, which the average time to beat is 44 hours, but with Monster Hunter games, you can just spend so much time building and grinding out your characters, and that's where the fun really lies. It may not be the longest or most content-rich of the Monster Hunter games, sure, but still the hours spent, every single one of those hours is intense and fun, and you're always growing and you're always learning and you're always figuring out a new enemy type, or you're always gaining some new piece to craft a new piece of armor, and it's just good all the way. And if you haven't played a Monster Hunter game, Rise is a good place to start. So good luck, have fun. Now, next over at number 4, we have Nioh, The World Ends With You. Now, this time, things are fully 3D, which of course means there's a lot more to do. The average time to beat The World Ends With You is 48 hours. Now, you're battling your way through this adventure and collecting pins to give your characters new abilities, and you're also exploring a kind of modern new representation of Shibuya in Tokyo, Japan. There are plenty of things to check out, characters to interact with, restaurants, there's shops, of course, there's like an in-game social network, there's a lot to check out. And really, it's just a great follow-up to The World Ends With You. This was like one of those games that just came out for the DS and blew people away. So to have an actual good follow-up that captures that feel again, but blows it out of the water, is something totally worth checking out. Now, down to number 3, we have Lost Judgment. The average time to beat this game is around 50 hours, and if you played the original game this is a sequel to, Judgment, you know that it's dense. These are, of course, spin-off Yakuza games, which are also extremely dense, and what you get here is a fun world, people to beat up, and lots of mysteries to solve. These games, of course, walk an incredible tightrope between fun action brawler style gameplay, Japanese soap opera melodrama, and just complete wacky absurdity. You can really get anything you want out of these style of games, and Lost Judgment brings a lot. Of course, new, interesting, compelling side quests that will take you quite a bit of time, a whole interactive high school to explore with its own sub-quest system to check out, and just an interesting and compelling and more personal story this time around, not to mention a new fighting style. There's a lot here, there's a cool world to explore, and a lot of dudes to kick in the face. Lost Judgment is absolutely awesome, and if you've never played any of these games from this studio, Lost Judgment is still a really good place to jump in. Now, over at number 2, we have Returnal, a game that just as much as people really like it, it hasn't gotten enough mainstream love in 2021. And maybe that's for its unique structure, its unique style, its whole run-based gameplay. Maybe it's the challenge. So for Returnal, the average time to beat is around 30 hours, but this is really gonna depend on, I don't know, how good you are or how long it takes you to really grasp the game's elements if you like to take it slow. Returnal is pretty challenging. The bosses can be pretty intense. The die and reset thing might not be for everybody, but what you get is a pretty addictive experience. You know, you'll find yourself being like, ooh, just one more run, because this third-person shoot 'em up bullet hell style gameplay is so good, but also you're trying to unravel this cool space sci-fi mystery along the way. So while it's not like an 80-hour Horizon Zero Dawn or a million-hour Skyrim or anything like that, you can sink a ton of time into Returnal, and all of it will be pretty satisfying. Now, over at number 1, another weird one to mention is Loop Hero. Now, the average time to beat this game is around 35 hours, and it's a pretty unique indie game. You're in this world that's in a never-ending time loop, and essentially it's kind of like an old-school style but card-based system where you dole out cards to build out dungeons and areas for a little hero to get through, and it can have incredibly addictive qualities. Now, a lot of people kind of chalk this up as one of those idle clicker games, like a cookie clicker type of thing, but we find it a bit more compelling here, and while it can be a fairly passive experience, it's also still just engaging, and you could dump a ton of time into it. It's really cool, it's different, it's unique. We also just haven't mentioned it really this year, so consider checking that out. Now, we also got some bonus games worth mentioning. Of course, Pokemon Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl remakes. Those, of course, you can sink plenty of time into. It's a Pokemon game, catch them all, right? Wildermyth is another fun one where like the style might deceive you, but what it is just a really compelling RPG with interesting and unique spins on character building. Then Inscription, another game that we just haven't given any love to this year, and we wanted to highlight it here. It's definitely worth checking out. And The Legend of Zelda Skyward Sword HD Remaster re-release was also 2021. A lot of people forgot about it, but you can sink a ton of time into it for a Zelda game. So these are some lengthy single-player games from 2021 that you should still consider checking out. There are, of course, so many others out there, so we want to hear yours down in the comments. What game did you spend the longest amount of time playing in 2021? Especially if it was like a sort of single-player, story-driven thing with a beginning to end. Let us know. If you enjoyed this video, though, and maybe we helped steer you towards a new game, clicking the like button's all you got to do. It really helps us out. And if you're new, consider subscribing, maybe hitting that notification bell, because we put out videos every single day. But as always, thanks for watching. We'll see you guys next time.